Hello, I'm Juan Camilo Estrada, and welcome to this new chapter of Epicentro. Today we will talk about the invasive plants that inhabit the Colombian territory. These are characterized by their adaptation and rapid expansion in different environments. Currently, biological invasions are considered to be the second cause of biodiversity loss in terrestrial, marine, and freshwater ecosystems. Below, Jose Navarro and Fernando Alzate tell us in detail how invasive plants arise. These invasive species are going to affect our entire biodiversity environment. They are going to affect our plants, our forests, as well as our animals.
La planta, como se puede ver,
The plant, as can be seen, branches out very abundantly from the base. This means that a single individual is excessively branched, and this branching means that each time it creates a kind of screen, a wall, and this wall, which is not only in one direction but in several dimensions,
sino en varias dimensiones, va a impedir, por ejemplo, que otras plantas
will prevent other plants, for example, that man himself may even clean it a little.
muy efectivo como planta invasora.
Las especies invasoras tienen muchas características.
From brushing against it, this growth is very effective as an invasive plant. Invasive species have many characteristics in terms of invasive properties, as many of them come from subtropical environments. For example, the environmental conditions that are different. There are seasons, for example, but not here. When they arrive, and here there are no seasons. They have the whole year to reproduce and grow. They are not limited by a factor such as the climate. Other species are larger and often they have no natural competitors.
Ellas no tienen competidores naturales.
Therefore, they can proliferate and can become a pest.
Proliferar y pueden volverse una plaga. Otra manera como pueden llegar las especies aquí.
Another way in which species can arrive here is through trade. Often we bring plant material from other places, and hidden animals or plant seeds are hidden inside
Animales escondidos o semillas de plantas también.
and can be released into the natural environment when the boxes are discarded.
Otras cosas. En fin, la problemática que hay es diversa frente a esas especies.
There are various problems with these species, and institutes such as Alexander von Humboldt have more or less described that there are more than 100 invasive species in the natural territory, and it is the duty of each one of us to control or try to control these species, either by their possession or by trying to control them effectively.
Espinoso y el ojo de poeta.
Una de las mayores consecuencias de la invasión
One of the biggest consequences of the invasion is caused by people. Jose Navarro tells us about the two most dangerous types of plants that inhabit Colombian territory. Let's first find out what the spiny retamo is all about.
Las que tenemos en Colombia es esta.
One of the most aggressive examples of invasive plants we have in Colombia is the spiny retamo. The spiny retamo is a member of the leguminous family of the Fabaceae, with the scientific name of European Hulex. It is a very successful plant, reproductively speaking, because it produces an enormous quantity of seeds and fruits, and additionally, as it is a leguminous plant, it fixes nitrogen from the soil. In other words, it lives very well fertilized due to its symbiosis and some nitrifying bacteria. These plants were brought, like most invasive plants, as ornamental plants. They have a very showy flowering. As we can see here in this individual, it flowers copiously yellow. It is very showy. These plants generate a living fence that can be used as such, but it is the worst mistake because it overflows copiously. It is said that a few years ago, in the 19th century or so,
Más o menos, algunos monjes la utilizaban.
Some monks used it to expiate guilt. They planted paths of these and walked among the thorny broom. It is one of the stories that we have with this plant, and there are records since the 19th century of having thorny broom in Colombia.
Espinoso en Colombia. Entonces, sí se tiene.
There is a long history of colonization of this plant in our country.
Esta es una planta de tierra fría.
This is a cold land plant. It is from the European area with seasons and everything else. In our environment, it has grown and has been growing very abundantly in the mall. Unfortunately, it has also ascended to the mall. Imagine an open mall with a lot of light, and dominated by this, it would destroy everything.
Es una especie.
It is a fast-growing species that flowers several times a year. After flowering comes fruiting, and it will also produce a large quantity of seeds. We have a serious problem because each time it runs away, displacing native vegetation that does not allow it to grow because of its aggressive nature due to its rapid growth.
¿Sabían que el rétamo espinoso?
Did you know that the prickly retamo is considered one of the most aggressive invasive species in the world? Some communities have practiced control methods in their territories due to its high reproduction. Most have not been successful. Let's see why it is difficult to eradicate it.
Primero porque
Eradicating is very complicated. Firstly, if it is going to be done manually with machete, for example, the thorns generate a lot of problems for the operator. If it is burnt, it could also be done. The first problem with burning is that the fire can overflow and burn what I don't want to burn. Let's say I would do a controlled burn, which is not ideal because it generates greenhouse gases.
está en que
It has been found that the seeds germinate much better after the fire. That is what is called prophyte plants. They are plants that have a great advantage over fire.
utilizar
Using chemical herbicides is always a serious problem due to water contamination and so on. So as you can see, we have a serious problem with this because it is not only the large amount of fruit it produces from seeds, but also the problem of eradicating it, of controlling it a little.
Entonces aquí, por ejemplo, estamos.
Here, for example, we are in an area between the forest and the open part of the open part is completely overrun with this species. We will have to generate a much more aggressive program for these species.
Hay una regla que alguien planteaba, que es la regla del 10.
There is a rule that someone raised, which is the rule of 10, with introduced organisms.
El 10% de las especies.
It is said that 10% of the species that you take from one place to another survives 10% of that 10% will reproduce and 10% will become a pest. That is 10% is what we come to have here like this.
Es lo que venimos a tener aquí como esto.
Some plants such as the Retamo espinoso have the ability to survive or adapt in places with a high frequency of fires, acquiring a taste for fire without suffering any damage. In a moment we will meet another invasive plant that is frequently found in Colombian territory.
Continuamos hablando sobre las...
We continue to talk about the invasive species that inhabit Colombian territory. We already knew that the Retamo espinoso is a species of robust and very prickly. Now let's learn about the poet's eye that since 1950 has been seen in the territory of Antioquia and is considered one of the invasive species in the country.
Otra de las plantas invasoras.
Another of the invasive plants, and perhaps the most conspicuous, that we can see in the Andes and with the greatest impact is the poet's eye. This species of the Cantacea family, very striking for its orange,
Anaranjado e internamente negras.
and internally black flowers, arrived in the country as an ornamental plant. There are records of this African plant in the Dominican Republic, Caribbean areas, around 1850.
Alrededor de esa fecha. Y un poco después llegó acá a Colombia.
And a little later it arrived here in Colombia. This plant was brought here as an ornamental. It grows very aggressively and it is a climber, which has somewhat sharp angular stems, which twine tightly around the plant on which they are growing,
y hace un poco de constricción.
and it makes a bit of a constriction, a building vine. The main effect, the most damaging, is that as it grows so densely, it will completely block the package of light.
Entonces, la planta que está aquí abajo
The plant that is down here will not have access to the main element of competitiveness in tropical forest, which is light.
que es la luz. Se reconoce pues muy fácilmente, no hay
It is very easy to recognize. There is no way to confuse the petals. They are fused. It looks like a kind of bell, and additionally, we will see at the base of a couple of leaf-like structures, and these structures are very common in the whole family.
la familia. Es una planta, como mencionaba,
It is a plant, as I mentioned, of African origin that does not generate the problem we have here, because here there are no competitors. There are no pests for these species, as there are in Africa.
la especie Tumberia lata,
The Tumberia lata species grows especially in the middle and highlands of the Andes,
en los altiplanos de Antioquia,
very frequent in the highlands of Antigua, Nariño, Cundiboyacensis, and can be found in abundance. But it also comes down a little and it reaches as far as the coffee growing area. This plant is one of the greatest risks we currently have for the health of the forests,
porque cubre totalmente el dosel,
because it completely covers the canopy, the upper part of the forest, and thus interrupts the passage of light and causes it to die, generate diseases, promote some kind of attack by pathogens, which makes it a very dangerous species.
Aunque
Although this species is beautiful and eye-catching, it is harmful to the forest because it takes over the native vegetation of the territory and generates negative effects due to its high reproduction rate. The poet's eye is a species that has been producing in recent years in an incredible way. Initially it was planted as decorative, very close to the farms, and over time it became evident that it is a typically invasive species. It is a species that reproduces vegetatively. It has shoots, as if by seed, and in this sense the control must be intensive.
Debe ser intensivo. Erradicarla, cortarla,
Eradicate it, cut it, and machete, uproot it, and be doing this activity permanently to prevent it from growing and spreading again.
para evitar que vuelva a crecer y a propagarse. Entonces, es una especie que por su
It is a species that, due to its aggression, invasive nature, requires permanent management, and it is very important that the people who have these species on their properties contribute to its eradication.
y ya existen guías
There are already guides where they can find out how this specific management or eradication of this species could be carried out.
de esta especie.
Esta planta se viene haciendo control manual.
For example, there are studies which show that in a small area where this plant exists, we can easily find 20,000 seeds in 1 square meter.
Descomunal. Entonces, por ejemplo, hay estudios donde demuestran cómo en un área pequeña,
which it produces quickly and which are going to be in the seed bank. There are dormant seeds waiting for the opportunity to germinate.
hay latentes y esperando la oportunidad para germinar. Otra ventaja para ella
Another advantage for it, given to it by the environment here in the neotropics, Colombia in particular, is at soil level. This plant forms a large number of nodules at root level.
esos nódulos
These nodules are inhibited by nitrifying bacteria that fix nitrogen. Nitrogen is always deficient in soils, and this plant feeds on nitrogen by association with the nitrifying bacteria found in the soil.
que se encuentran a nivel del suelo. Entonces, en la forma de crecimiento, su morfología,
The way it grows, its morphology, its nutritional peculiarities, and its seed production make it very effective very successful invasive plant.
Muy exitosa.
La poca efectividad
The ineffectiveness of invasive plant control has to do with dispersal and the large amount of the seeds that produce. Let's see what the experts have to say.
Que se reproducen por raíz.
There are invasive species that reproduce by root and sprout new plants through the root. There are other species that are invasive through seeds, species that have a permanent production of fruit and seeds throughout the year.
Permanente de frutos y de semillas durante todo el año, y eso hace que estas semillas se rieguen.
And this means that the seeds are watered all the time, permanently. And for this reason, they also become invasive species with this aggressive character that colonize important areas.
Importantes.
Esto es lo que quedó de la flor.
This is what is left of the flower. Here we can see the seeds that are somewhat purple, and they have made studies of germination of these seeds, and they germinate 100%.
Y germinan el 100%. O sea, otro.
It is another variable in favor of the ojo de poeta.
Sí, tiene, típicamente en ellos se encuentra.
It has typically in them 4 seeds, and as we were saying, an enormous quantity of these fruits is produced.
Cada flor
Each flower is a fruit in potential. Therefore, the success in good part lies of this plant in the number of seeds that it puts.
número de semillas que pone.
Seed dispersal is an evolutionary mechanism that plant species use to adapt and survive, as well as to compete with other species in the same territory. With this strategy, they take over new areas, while other species disappear, which is why it's been so difficult to eradicate them.
anteriormente conocimos por qué
Previously, we learned why the spiny retamo and the poet's eye are considered invasive species. Now, Fernando and Jose show us a case of invasion of the poet's eye and what it is capable of doing to a native plant.
Se enreda con mucha fuerza.
Here we can see that this plant is very strongly entangled on who it's growing. But the other great mechanism that this plant has is to grow very abundantly and cover the foliage. The leaves of where it is growing, for example, this plant is a fuchsia. On this fuchsia that this plant is growing, it will no longer allow its photosynthesis.
Esta planta ya no le va a permitir hacer fotosíntesis.
Estas tienen preferencias por algunas especies.
Do they have preferences for certain plant species? No, it grows on everything, on pastures, on the slope. It grows without any preference.
Es que mira aquí el poder
The invasive power it has is extremely high
y puede llegar a cubrir todo el dosel.
and can cover the entire canopy. It covers it completely, interferes with the light socket, and this plant is more of a cold soil plant, is what's behind already drowned. In large part, it sees that it is reaching the canopy, and when it reaches it, it will cover it completely and interrupts the passage of light. It is incredible how nature acts to deteriorate the structure of other plants, fracturing and distorting their flowering process and fruit production. Have you ever seen any of these species? Fernando and Jose make us a very important invitation, and that is to care for and conserve native plants.
Pero debemos resaltar que
We must emphasize that introducing plants or species of any group is very dangerous because most of them or a proportion of them will become invasive plants or species. The call is for us not to bring that plant,
no traigamos esa planta, ese animalito de no sé dónde.
that little animal from I don't know where, on the journey to Europe, North America. That is very risky. We can generate a very big imbalance here because those plants or those animals will not have a controller, a competitor here in our environment, and therefore we'll have a skyrocketing population of these species. If we have learned anything over the years, it is that introducing species is very risky.
Es un deber de cada uno de nosotros
It is a duty of each one of us to conserve the biodiversity in some way from our own position. That is to say, not to introduce species that we are not sure are not native, to try not to bring species from other places, to try to ensure that ornamental species cannot all adapt to these ecosystems. We have to be careful in some way with this. These are simply very basic reasons and facts that we must take into account in order not to end this diversity that is called Colombia.
Y es momento de
It's time to review the photographs that you share with us through our email, epicentrotaragro@gmail.com. This is our section closer to the field. Finca La Bendición from his Instagram with the hashtag Más cerca del campo TV shares 2 photographs of chickens and tell us some benefits of eating precisely the broth of free-range chicken. Allows us to obtain and strengthen our bones due to the properties it contains such as calcium and magnesium, and also helps us to combat the symptoms of flu and colds. There you see the perfect hens. Beautiful, very nice picture. Luz Estela Caceres shares with us a photo of the pistils of a flower. Remember that the pistil is a female productive organ and is formed by the stigma, the style and the ovary, and inside the ovary are the ovules. Alexandra Marin from Risalda shares with us from her Instagram a photo that she calls honguitos de colores, colored mushrooms. See what a beautiful photo with those super vivid colors, a beautiful depth. That blur gives it a very elegant touch. And she also shares with us a photo of another type of plant which she calls solecitos de la montaña. Those colors stand out as pure macro photography. Very beautiful. Thank you very much for participating in the Más cerca del campo TV section. Remember that you can send any photograph, any video that brings you closer to the field to our email, epicentrotvagro@gmail.com, or post them on social networks with the hashtag Más cerca del campo TV. So we end this new Epicenter program. Thank you very much for joining us. Remember to write to our email epicentrotvagro@gmail.com. Let's share your photos, your comments, your videos, and everything you want. I'm Juan Camilo Estrada. We will see you next time.